Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to HTML. I cannot wait to get started with a phenomenal guest of mine. His name is Tom Bunn. Now, Tom, I'm going to try my best to give an introduction to you and as to the work that you do and what you specialize in. So, Tom is a pilot and a therapist. He happens to be both, and he specializes in fear of flying, and he has actually helped me get over my fear of flying 10 years ago. And this is just, I feel like it's really just cool just to be doing this together. He's wrote two phenomenal books. One is, I'll show everyone the first one, which is called SOAR, the Breakthrough Treatment for Fear of Flying. And SOAR is Tom's pretty much company, and you could kind of see the background where it says SOAR and Panic Free, which is his second book right here. So Panic Free, the 10-day program to end panic, anxiety, and claustrophobia. So wow, Tom, I really enjoyed your work, and it's just it's really nice to have you here, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great that you've got some good results, but I tell you, there's been some amazing research out of the Salk Institute that I think can make it even better.
I'd like to hear.
What they have done is they changed the DNA of their lab animals, the rats that they work on brain research with. What they did is they made the part of the brain that switches the brain on and off, parts of the brain on and off, made them light sensitive so they can go in with a fiber optic and shine a light on one tiny switch and turn that part of the brain on or off. And what they've discovered is that, well, we used to think the amygdala only produced trouble. It caused stress hormones to rev us up. And not shouldn't say trouble exactly, because sometimes it's useful. Sometimes it helps us know that we're in danger. Problem is with flying, we don't need it, but it still gives us the idea that we're in danger. But the other thing is, they found that the amygdala also can cause pleasure. So now they say, after we have an experience, we decide either A, it was a great experience, or it was a bad experience. And we label it sort of like a sticky note on that experience, whether to do it again or not. Now, past that sticky note, the brain produces a very tiny, they say 1 molecule in size, a very tiny piece of code. They call it valence code. It can be positive or negative. It can also have intensity. And if the experience was good, it labels it positive, and depending on the intensity, how positive. If it was a traumatic experience, it labels it negative. And if it was life threatening, very negative. So, what happens now, the next time that you are thinking about or are getting into this good experience, you get good feelings. The amygdala reads that very quickly. Like in 30 thousandths of a second, gives you good feelings. If you start thinking about doing something that is labeled danger, you start getting stress hormones and feel like you need to get away from the situation. So that's how the amygdala, even for creatures that have no real ability to think, are protected by the amygdala. And we still have that. We have an ability to think. We tend to think that's the whole ballgame. But our emotional life is mostly controlled by code.
So let me
That's
just let me
amazing.
just recap that real quick.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me, and I want to make sure I get this right. The amygdala is just tracking code. It's just tracking the
Yes.
meaning of the meaning that's attributed to an event, whether it's positive or negative. And use the word valence. There's positive, negative. There's positive valence and there's negative valence,
Yes.
right? And that's all it pretty much remembers. And so when the same thing kind of pops up, uh, I remember you used something. I remember learning from you the example, which I loved with the scanner. I think that will help people really understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
That when it just
Exactly.
comes, it doesn't have to be what it. It's not about the actual item. It's just about what's being scanned or
Yeah.
how
If
it's
you
being
go to the
scanned.
supermarket and you scan a product by a can of tuna fish by the scanner, if you opened up the can and showed it the tuna fish, it wouldn't know what to do with that. It only reads code. That's it, and that's what the amygdala does.
That's it. That's it.
So what we could spend endless amounts of time trying to convince people that flying is safe. And if you don't also change the code, you're not going to change how it feels when you fly.
Right. So this is, and for everyone watching, this is really what I wanted to get into it with you, because your strengthening exercise, the way that you change the code, the way that you change the meaning of an event,
Yeah.
I feel like that work of yours was honestly groundbreaking, and it helped me. When I was 16, I actually used the strengthening exercise on myself. I'm 26 now, so I'm talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was very appreciative. I did join your program to get over fear of flying. And what I've noticed is that it doesn't just have to work for fear of flying. It could really work for any type of fear. I definitely want to go into that with you. So here's the question: how can we change the code, the meaning of that we attribute to a negative event? Like, it's supposed to be neutral, right? Like a plane is just a plane, but people who had difficulty with flying, they had a negative event. They feel like there was two things. Usually, you said no escape and something else.
No control.
Usually no
Yeah.
control. When you have no control and no escape, you're bound to feel traumatized, panicky symptoms, or threatened. That's a good
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Threatened.
Unsafe. Yeah.
Right, right. And so now we're attributing the code that we're giving to an airplane or whatever it might be, it could be anything, is negative valence. How can we switch that to positive valence?
Okay. If the airplane or the elevator or the bridge or the tunnel or whatever it is labeled no control, no immediate escape, it's, as far as the amygdala is concerned, a threat and releases stress hormones. So here's a picture of people getting ready to board an airplane. So for them, looking at that airplane, it says, "Holy smoke, no control if I get on there, no escape. If something goes wrong, I'm dead. I better get out of here." Well, that's what we might think, but what the amygdala is doing is just reading the code and giving you the feelings that go with that thought. Now, it's an interesting thing. Probably the thought follows the feelings. The feelings are probably the first thing that happens. Then you get these feelings like, I need to get out of here. And then you kind of explain it.
It's funny
But
because CBT therapists would say
other
usually
way
it's a
around.
thought. Yep, yep.
Well, see, the thing is that, yes, we tend to think that thoughts cause the feelings, but it's actually the code attached to the thought. Because the amygdala's not, it's only the size of a nut, right? That's where it gets its name, Greek word for
Hmm.
almond. It's not, it doesn't have the brain width to know what you're thinking. It really is like the scan at the supermarket. If you took a can of cat food, opened it up, or tuna fish, or whatever it is, and showed it to the scanner, it wouldn't know what to do with that. And the amygdala doesn't know what to do with your thoughts. It only reads code. That's it. It's a computer geek. It doesn't know anything about anything but code.
Just the barcode.
Yeah. In this
Yeah.
case, Leland's code. Yes, exactly. So to change the code, what we do is, let's go back to this picture. Here's a picture that has a negative code for a lot of people. So where do you get the good code? Well, let's go all the way back to birth, where a baby gets good code from its mom, the mom's face, the mom's voice quality, the mom's touch, being hugged, chest to chest skin contact. That's good stuff. That calms the baby. Why? Because the baby's born with built-in DNA that says we'll activate the calming system through human contact, face, voice, and touch. So that's built into us at birth. We still have it. So now, if we want to change the code on this little tricky situation you're getting on the airplane, we first need to find someone who gives you good code. So, do you have a friend? Probably someone who doesn't care whether you fly or not, so there's no pressure. It also needs to be someone who doesn't engage in making themselves feel better by putting you down. It also needs to be a person who doesn't judge you or criticize you. The kind of person you'd go have a beer with because it's really easygoing and comfortable. So I tend to say probably you wouldn't want to choose the person you're married to. It starts out at honeymoon time where you're totally okay, but after that it goes downhill. So pick a drinking buddy, someone who's really laid back, who doesn't care, like I say, whether you fly or not. And then at the moment you're with that person, you're picking up good code unconsciously. The person is sending good code unconsciously. You're picking it up unconsciously, and it activates the calming system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. Activates the calming system. So as you get this good code from your friend's face, you put the picture by their face, so that the good code from the face changes the code. Step one, at least, changing the code about that boarding the airplane situation. Second step is, imagine you look at it together with your friend. You hold a corner, they hold a corner. Talk about it. Now, their voice quality, remember the baby gets calmed by the mom's face, voice, and touch? Your friend's voice quality has a calming effect, changing the code on this picture. Last thing, touch. As you're talking with your friend, you imagine they put their arm around you, give you a hug. So that's it. Three things: face, voice, and touch. Change the code while you're looking at it together and talking about it together.
Yeah, and it's that simple. And I want to summarize that too. So again, for everyone watching, that's pretty much what you termed as the strengthening exercise.
Yeah,
And this automatically, it sounds way too good to be true,
I know.
but yeah, it does. But it's true. This automatically controls, not even controls. This automatically
Well, it just stops the amygdala from reacting to these things.
the stress hormones don't even release at that point,
Yeah,
right?
because
And
the amygdala's job is to try to keep you safe, keep you alive. And so when
exactly.
it runs across code that says, "Hey, this is dangerous stuff," I tell you one that I think is really funny is suppose you're really sick and you get taken to the hospital. The doctors can't figure out what is going on with you. So let's say let's do an MRI. Let's scan his body. So they put you on this table that has wheels on it, and you start to run into this machine, and the amygdala says, "Henry, you got to get the hell out of here. This machine's going to kill you because you have no control and no escape if you go in there. And here's this machine that's going to save your life potentially, and the amygdala thinks you need to get out of there." So this is why any situation where we don't have control or escape could be thought of as, from the amygdala's point of view, is don't do it.
Yeah, yeah. It just goes by code. And so what you found is, as long find something that is related to more of a secure attachment from your past where you felt really safe. I feel like that I guess
Yes,
summarizes
really
that.
safe, no threat.
Yeah, no threat, really safe. And imagine a time like that, and those feelings of safety override feelings of threat automatically, and that's how we're
Yes,
wired. Because I think that there are times where we need to feel safe and unthreatened, like in terms of taking care of a baby. I remember you discussed that at one point in your work, that evolution has come so far as to help us be able to mitigate our stress hormones in order to be there for the baby, the child, right?
yeah. It turns out that, obviously the sympathetic nervous system, when it revs us up, makes us feel like running or fighting. Well, you're not going to do a lot of reproduction when you're running or fighting. You got to shift gears, right?
Right.
So how does the nature get us involved in making other human beings? It's got to kind of shut that fear down. And so what happens is we produce oxytocin. And when we produce
Oxytocin
oxytocin,
automatically shuts down
it just
fear
shuts down
hormones.
the fear system. I
Wow.
kind of had this story I thought was kind of funny. Suppose you go to a party and you meet somebody and you start talking, and you're really clicking, and you kind of started to turn each other on, and you say, "Well, let's get out of here." So you start to leave the party, and your friend says, "Hey, get out of here, quick, quick, out, get." And so you get outside, and she says, "Wow, oh, that was close." And you say, "What do you mean?" He says, "Oh, my boyfriend's in the mafia. I didn't know he was going to be here. If he'd seen us together, he'd have killed us both." So a person in their right mind would say, "Well, honey, it was nice meeting you. Goodbye." But when your oxytocin is flowing, it's like, "Okay, let's go." So you got
Yeah.
no fear. It just shuts down the fear system, and it makes reproduction a lot easier, particularly for females because they get oxytocin during foreplay. Males, though, get more oxytocin during orgasm, but not, well, in order to cause bonding. It's better for the child if there's two people taking care of it rather than one. So at orgasm, we males get oxytocin, causes us to bond emotionally to our partner, but then we fall asleep and they get annoyed at us.
So it's to make the males stay, pretty much stay
We
along,
can make
because
the
that
guys stay, hopefully, yeah.
yeah, hopefully. But and I understand, and that makes total sense, right? Because to be there for the child. So there's
Exactly.
evolution, right? So there's evolutionary evolutionary reasons for why we produce oxytocin, and why, even though in anxiety provoking situations, we evolution has said no, it's more important to feel safe, unthreatened, for the propagation of, our race. And
What I suggest is, for example, I mean, you could set your cell phone for every 5 minutes or 10 minutes on the plane and think about some X-rated situation. Or you could just simply take an oxytocin producing moment and link it to walking on the plane, and then link it to sitting down in the seat and the door closing and taxi out. So that as those things happen, you don't have to do
right.
anything. Just automatically produce some oxytocin.
Right. So let's try and bring this over to, I guess, let's say someone's feeling socially anxious, right? And
Yeah.
they're afraid to go to a party.
Yeah.
And so I guess what they could do in order to mitigate those stress hormones is to kind of break down the elements of the, because right now it's just a big monster. They need to kind of break it down, right?
Yeah,
Like
break
like
down the social event to getting in the car, seeing the outside of the building, standing there, walking in, seeing nobody you know, maybe you see somebody you do know. What do you do next? The uncertainty of it all.
right. Break down
Um,
each thing that might
yeah.
make you afraid, and then how do we link? What do we do?
Okay. Now then, we look for that person who is non-judgmental, and we imagine that they somehow magically have the series of photographs we just did in our mind of those situations, and they put the first one by their face. Then you look at it together and talk about it. Then you get a hug. Then you go to the next picture until you've done all of the scenes that we can come up with that could cause stress. Broken down,
Right.
like you say, hey, you don't want to go to McDonald's and try to swallow a Big Mac whole. You want to go bite by bite. So you break it
Slowly.
down into small bits and link each one to your friend's face and voice and touch. So you get the same benefit from your friend's face, voice, and touch that the baby gets from the mom's face, voice, and touch.
Yeah. So I guess an example, guys. Remember, now I'm just talking to the audience, I guess. Find an event that's safe for you. Find something that you felt really safe, that you weren't judged. Remember that event, and now remember that person's face, especially their eyes, right in the beginning. So visualize their face, visualize their eyes, visualize and feel how safe you are with them, and then think of one part of the scary event, like, oh, imagine that you're walking into a party, and that makes you socially anxious. Now
Or a
try to
job
bring it.
interview, or um, what's some other situations that are anxiety provoking? A
I
policeman,
think everything, huh?
policeman stopping you. I don't know, but this is. But you see, we're looking at a situation where we know the stressors that are coming up at us. What about stressors that hit us and we don't know? Stop for a moment, look up, and let's say look up because usually when we get into physical feelings, we're looking down. Look up. That helps get us sort of out of that lock into the feelings, and find a door. Imagine the door is opening and you see your friend walk in. You see your friend's face. They smile, they say hello, they come over and give you a hug. So you see, we have those three things: your friend's face, your friend's voice, your friend's touch, in answer to the stress hormones. See, you're manually responding to the stress, manually calming yourself. And if you do this, get into the habit of doing this, it'll become routine, and then it'll become unconscious. And you just won't have as much stress to deal with.
Yeah, and then automatically, the thing that you're afraid of, it's since it's already paired with an event that you feel safe with, it will be scanned by the amygdala as safe, unthreatening. There's no need for alarm, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's
Yeah, it could take that situation and fix the situation, but you can also just get used to having stress trigger relaxation, stress trigger bringing to mind your friend.
you could do that in the moment. You're saying,
Well, if what you do is, you, in the moment when you're stressed by something unexpected, you bring your friend's face, voice, and touch to mind. You get in the habit of letting this feeling of stress bring that to mind, so that the next time something unexpected happens, the very fact that you're getting some stress will bring to mind your friend's face, voice, and touch. You see, look,
oh, so,
when we run into a situation that's actually, let's say, actually dangerous, we do need alarm. The problem with alarm is, well, good and bad. First of all, we need it. We need it to grab our attention no matter what we're doing. It's got to cut through our imagine, our whatever we're doing, and grab our attention. If the alarm is powerful enough to grab and control our attention, it means we can't think. Because to think, you've got to have control of your mind and think about the past and what you know about this association, et cetera, et cetera. How you,
It shuts down the prefrontal
yeah.
cortex.
So yeah, and so it grabs your attention, and you need something to push back from alarm enough that you can start using your mind again. See, there's a thing on YouTube that a neuroscientist says, look, if you get a feeling of alarm, the stress hormones will burn off in 90 seconds. Don't do anything for 90 seconds. So tell me, if you're going through an intersection and a car goes through a red light, you're going to wait for 90 seconds to decide what to do? Don't think so. You need something as soon as you get the alarm that you're in trouble to calm you down enough to figure, what do I need to avoid a crash? So we need an automatic, immediate kick in of calming. Once we get the alarm, we don't need it anymore. It gets
Right.
in the way. We need
Yeah.
this automatic calming. So that's why you can practice it by every time you get stressed, unstress yourself with your friend's face, voice, and touch.
Well, anxiety isn't meant to be to be on constantly. That actually makes us age quicker. By the way,
Yeah.
and it's very unhealthy for us. And so it's meant to be this quick kind of alarm system for us to react to stress in our environment and to move on. But when we kind of get stuck in that, I like how you're saying that you could kind of use this in the moment, because earlier we talked about how the strengthening exercises kind of how we prepare, right? And I think you talked about the thing with the Indian guy. It's the same kind of
Yeah.
story. It's like he didn't prepare. So if you don't prepare for something, you can sort of do it in the moment. If there's an unexpected, if there's unexpected anxiety happening, and I think what you're really trying to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you'll get so used to using this technique that whenever stress hormones come up, it won't even be so alarming to you for anything in general. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. You ever play whack-a-mole?
A long time ago.
The mole comes up, you try to hit it with a hammer. So can you imagine the mole pops up and it automatically goes down? You don't have to pop it with a hammer anymore.
Exactly. You don't. But let's
So
say
as soon
it's
as you get the alarm, it just goes away. And you see, the people who have really secure childhoods, that's what they have. They don't understand why anybody has trouble with anxiety. And people who have trouble with anxiety panic don't understand why anybody doesn't. Because you see, some of us have instant automatic activation of the parasympathetic. As soon as we get stress hormones, as soon as we say, hey, something's going on, we calm down and figure what it is and what we need to do about it. Others of us, we get stress hormones and we have no automatic calming. We stay in a state of alarm until the stress hormones burn off. And during that 90 seconds, we can't really do anything useful.
that's an insecure attachment, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry. So let's go into childhood and how that affects how we deal with anxiety in our future, and how does that even happen, right? So how does an infant, I guess, develop a secure insecure
Well,
attachment?
first of all, you're going to get attachment. The infant is going to attach. The question is it going to be secure attachment based on feeling safe with the parent, or insecure attachment by not feeling safe and responded to? So, what the research suggests is that insecure attachment, the parent or caregiver responds to the child's upset at least 50% of the time, to the point that the child is completely calm. And they include in that completely calming, culminating with chest to chest contact. So that's probably not a high bar, calming the child at least half the time fully. But what scares me about this is that the research also says that if the caregiver frightens the child one time, they're not going to become securely attached to that caregiver. One time. How many? It's like we always, a lot of us lose it with our kids, right? How can we do that? Well, the idea is, if during this very important period in the first year and a half of life, you just got to not lose it with the kid. Otherwise, the kid won't be securely attached. Maybe after that, you can lose it if you can quickly repair it. That's okay. It's also nice to know that if it seems like the end of the world and then you can fix it, that's also a good uh, talent to have. But initially, we just need to know that we are going to be responded to and we're safe. If something goes bad, it's not the end of the world. With an insecure attached person, if something goes wrong, it's the end of the world.
End of the world, right?
And they're on their own. So you got to, if you know you're not going to calm yourself down automatically or manually, you don't know anything about that. You just know that I get stressed. I have a hard time with it. I just have to control everything to make sure I don't get stressed. I have to control everything I can control. This gets to be a problem because then you try to control your mate.
You're trying to control everything, and we know those types. It's people that are constantly anxious and overthinkers and are constantly trying to make everything perfect. Uh, so
Well,
so
that's
how
what you
could
mentioned about thinking. Sometimes people say, "Well, how do I stop these intrusive thoughts?" I think thoughts are supposed to intrude, but for whatever reason, we need to let whatever is coming to mind come to mind. The question is, if it's bothersome, stressful, link it to your friend's face, voice, and touch. Instead of trying to keep it out of mind, just condition it so it's okay.
so you're in a way you're kind of creating uh, a a a corrective emotional experience. I think that's what it's
Yeah,
coined as. It's
yeah,
it's you're recreating a secure attachment for people who didn't have that growing up.
yeah. You're looking for the person who's not your parent, who's your buddy, who you are secure with, and then taking the things that are troubling and linking to that secure relationship with that person so that those things aren't troubling anymore. You're
It's as if
message.
you're going back to 1.5 years of age,
Yeah,
and you're there, and this time mommy is around, and even though there's something stressful going on, you feel that you're being taken care for and that you're safe. That's
yeah. I tell you, next door neighbor Hugh Taylor is head of OBGYN at Yale. And at the beginning of COVID, he was out in his yard doing gardening in his sweat, in his scrubs. He does that. And I was out walking the dog. And of course, we're social distancing because I don't want to be around a doctor who might have COVID. So we're standing a few feet
sure.
apart and talking about COVID. And Hugh tells me that Yale has not had a case where an employee has gotten COVID in the hospital. And I thought, that's amazing. He says, yeah, but here's how we did it. We knew there was going to be a shortage of N95s. So we bought 200 respirators. Now, what I mean by that is the kind of mask that you would put on if you were going to paint your car or remove asbestos or sand a lot of wood so it doesn't get in your lungs. Now, those are reusable and you can put filters on them. You can put N95 filters on those things. And what they do is they cover your whole face, starting at the bridge of your nose and then spreading out and going all the way underneath your mouth. So all the air you breathe in through your nose or your mouth comes in through these filters. Now, the thing about it is it feels exactly like the oxygen mask I wore when I was flying fighters in the Air Force 50 years ago. As soon as I put it on, I realized, oh, it feels just like an oxygen mask. And the same thing, in the same time, I felt weird. Why? Because when I was flying fighters, the challenge of flying a fighter is so intense that you spend a lot of time in overwhelm, feeling derealized, like things are not real. So I figured, hey, I got this mask. I go to the supermarket. It's going to be great. I put the damn mask on and I feel derealized, like what is going on? Can you imagine going to the supermarket, picking out groceries, feeling like disconnected from reality?
That's the code. That's the code you put in 50 years ago.
So what? Yeah. So what happened was I I put up with this for weeks, and then I just happened, not intentionally, just happened to tell a friend about it, and it stopped. Just that connection with another human being, that person's presence recoded the experience to positive.
It's really amazing. Yeah. And I love how you could use this recoding with anything in life, and I also you don't for some anxiety disorders, it is sometimes beneficial to really go deep and psychoanalytically uh, study it and understand the reasons and the unconscious and all of that. But sometimes people just need to get over their fears, And they
Well,
don't really need to go to therapy for 3 years on end.
yeah, Alan Shore teaches um, around. He goes around the country teaching people how to do really good psychotherapy, and he wrote a book called "The Science of the Art of Psychotherapy." And what he explains is that in the presence of the therapist, who's supposed to be, let's say, is non-judgmental, not critical. In other words, a safe person. When the client is with a safe person, they're picking up signals that are calming, which then allows them to go deeper into stuff that's really difficult for them to deal with when they're solo.
And the therapist's presence can release that oxytocin, can be that secure attachment that they need. And maybe even in the therapy room, right, people could, because of the therapist's presence and because of how they feel around the therapist, that in itself could be curative.
Exactly, because you've got some lump of stuff that's just awful. You can't even stand to think about it. But you take the chance of thinking about it and talking about it and feeling it in the presence of the therapist, and the therapist's presence recodes it so that you can then think about it without it bothering you.
Yeah. So there's many ways to recode. It could be with oh, sorry, Tom. Give me a minute. Oh, I'm back. Sorry, something just happened. Anyway, so there are many. Do you hear me, Tom? You hear me good?
Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah.
So there's many ways to recode, right? There's many ways to recode, and you could either use your a past relationship that you had with someone but the commonality is the safety, right? So someone in the
Yeah.
past that you felt safe with, unthreatened with, someone in the present that
Mhm.
you feel safe with and unthreatened with, like for example, a therapist. It could be a friend, um, anyone that you really feel, anyone that could help release those feelings of safety and those and that oxytocin that we're looking for,
Well, yeah, but
to help.
it's two different things, really. Just want to make sure that's clear. That the activation of the calming system, activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, that's triggered by human face, human voice, human touch. Oh, by the way, it's also triggered by exhaling, breathing exercises. Now, keep in mind, breathing exercises, they tell you breathe in slowly, breathe out slowly. Mm, it's only when you're breathing out that you get the activation of the calming system. When you breathe in, it's not being activated. So you could breathe in fast and breathe out slow. That would be more effective. And but that's not good enough for flying, because what happens in flying, this in turbulence, for example, is just too intense because the plane is dropping. Well, the plane's not really dropping. It feels like it's dropping a lot. People get frightened. The amygdala, every time it thinks you're falling, it releases stress hormones to try to get your attention. Like if you're up on a step ladder and changing a light bulb, if you start to lose your balance, you better get some stress hormones to tell you, hey, forget about the light bulb for a moment, get your balance back. So you get zapped, and then you get your balance checked, and you go back to your job. But on the airplane, you get one shot of stress hormones after another. And so breathing, you could try doing breathing, but it's only going to help when you're breathing out. As soon as you breathe back in, you get this overwhelming amount of stress hormones come and drive you up the wall again. So it just doesn't cut it for turbulence.
Yeah, but I think you wanted to clear up something with the parasympathetic nervous system, right? Uh,
Well, yes, I'm not sure where I was headed with that, but um, no, I had lost it. Do you remember
it's
what?
okay. It'll come back. Well, we were talking about just how to activate how to use finding a person to activate the calming system,
Yeah.
right? And then you wanted to
Oh
differentiate.
yeah. No, what I was saying is keep separate the oxytocin versus the activation of the calming system.
Yeah,
It,
can you help differentiate
yeah,
that for me?
yeah. See. First of all, think about the sympathetic nervous system spikes you up. The parasympathetic pushes back. The operation of the parasympathetic depends on the face, voice, and touch of another person, either active or internalized. Oxytocin just prevents the shot of stress hormones in the first place.
So now I understand. But does oxy? So how? But you're saying that the face, voice, and touch is produced, that's more linked to the parasympathetic nervous
Yeah.
system.
Well, it is the parasympathetic nervous system. Yeah, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, activates the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve's longest nerve in the body. It slows the heart rate, slows the breathing rate, relaxes the gut.
So I thought linking back to, I thought the person that we're talking about, the safety, is more linked to oxytocin though. So how do we release oxytocin?
Well, the oxytocin stuff is more sexual,
Right. That makes
and
sense.
this calming stuff is the more face, voice, and touch of a person who's safe to be with.
Right. All right. But either way, so either way, but does it really matter? Does it really
Well,
matter
yeah.
which one?
Okay, let's go. Look, say you can activate the parasympathetic nervous system with any person, even a stranger, if it's the right person who's sending you good signals that you're safe with them. Oxytocin is produced when you nurse a child, because what happens is a new mom is overwhelmed with things to do. Yet she's got to sit for half an hour and do nothing but nurse. How can she stand to do that with all these pressures? When she starts to nurse, she produces a massive amount of oxytocin, so she can have this thought, man, I got so much stuff to do, I can't keep up with it, but I just don't give a damn because there's no push behind it. Okay, that's one. But oxytocin does two things. It shuts the fear system down and it causes bonding. So when you hold a newborn child, male or female, hold a newborn child, you produce oxytocin to make you feel protective of that child. Males get oxytocin orgasm to feel bonded to the female. If he sticks around, then there's two people to take care of the kid rather than one. Females get oxytocin more during foreplay, so their fear of getting involved sexually goes away.
Hmm.
Now, don't know why dogs fit in here, but if we interact with our dogs, we produce oxytocin. There's one more, and that is a solid chest to chest hug, particularly if it's skin to skin, produces oxytocin.
Right. So people that might even be at a extreme level of anxiety might be able to even do, I guess, some of these exercises, like with the dog or with hugging somebody.
Yeah.
Maybe they could actually do that in order to like sort of a competing response in a way.
Well, that brings up an interesting question there, because you see, sometimes I talk to someone, they say, I don't have anyone who's safe to be with. Well, maybe so, but you could go back in time and maybe you can find someone in the past who, when you were with them, you felt safe. Um, the person you bring to mind doesn't have to be alive anymore necessarily.
Right. It
And
doesn't
also,
matter.
we can be very impressed with picking the right person, and we don't have to. We're impressed with high hard charging people who are critical. We're looking for not that kind of person. Someone who's relaxed and, hey, if you fly, you're fine. If you don't fly, you're fine. If you get stressed, well, that's too bad. But I hope you don't. It's like just easygoing, not judgmental. You're
Yeah,
fine.
find that right person, and you could use it from. I love how you said you could use it from your past, because that feeling is still there. It still lives on, and inside of your experience
Yeah.
when you imagine that person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes if you go back to your original family and you think about how your parents were in your case, but your grandmother wasn't, or your grandfather wasn't, or a cousin was different than that.
yeah. So I have a different question for you
Yeah.
actually. So Tom, I was really wondering about. So now I understand really the difference between producing oxytocin and activating the parasympathetic
Yeah.
nervous system, the calming system.
Yeah.
But your work, I guess, the strengthening exercise is more based on the parasympathetic nervous system, right? And
Well, yeah, I actually use the same exercise for both, and that gets a little confusing. But maybe I could explain how it got started. It's totally stumbled on it. There was a therapist, Jerry Lynn Ross, who came up with thought stopping. The idea was put a rubber band on your wrist every time you think an anxiety producing thought, snap it, and cause yourself pain. That'll inhibit the thought, keep you from thinking it. Okay, it seemed to make sense, but I just don't like self inflicted pain. So I figured, what about instead of that, train people to automatically shift from an anxiety producing thought to some big deal that they've done. For example,
right,
I had a woman who was a marathon runner, And I said, okay, I want you to stand there. And when I give you this hand signal, I want you to go step, 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 and take yourself back to the marathon vividly as you can. So I'd say, okay, plane's taxiing out. Give her the signal to go back to the marathon. Plane's rolling down the runway. Give her the signal. And, go through the whole flight like that. She did okay. But it was really hit or miss whether it worked or not. But then I had a person on the phone session that I was doing saying, when I think about flying, I'm going to switch to thinking about nursing my child. And I thought to myself, you got to be crazy. You're going to get on the airplane and think you're never going to see the kid again. She called back a week later, said she had a perfect flight. And I was
Wow.
shocked. But I didn't know what to do with it until it happened 2 more times. And I thought, something is going on here that's weird. So that's when I found out oxytocin. It shuts down the fear system when you nurse the baby. Okay, so that explained that one. The other thing was, I found that if the thing that a person shifted their thoughts of flying to was getting engaged, that worked. But it was years before I understood why. When I ran across the research by Stephen Porges, he had discovered that when you're with a person who totally accepts you completely, that's when you get this activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. And when the parasympathetic is activated, the vagus nerve is stimulated. The vagus nerve, when stimulated, slows the heart rate, slows the breathing rate, relaxes the gut. So that's what happens when you're linking to getting engaged. The problem is, after a year or two, you're not totally accepted in your relationship. And we're not accepting the other as well as we did when we first got engaged. So that's why when people say, well, I'm going to link to my husband or wife, I say, well, I know I'm married to. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Got to be careful with that because you're not always totally accepted, right, from your partner all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
But
wow.
That's a tragic thing about our relationships,
I guess it's all part and parcel, but I like how you differentiated that, and I guess both kind of work. Either so you're saying if you produce oxytocin or the parasympathetic nervous system,
yeah, do both.
You
want to set up both, yeah, because one keeps you from producing stress hormones, the other overrides them.
Right, exactly, and the oxytocin stops it totally from even happening in the first place, and the parasympathetic nervous system overrides it.
I just want to kind of go over that because the easiest way to say it is it just shuts down the fear system, I guess. They're not quite sure exactly how yet. There's still some discussion about how it does it, whether it shuts down the receptors or I forgot the other explanation. But anyway, oxytocin does that job of providing calming by not allowing the stress hormones to get in the way. And therefore, mating can happen in that situation more easily than if you're in a fight or flight situation where you got to escape.
Exactly. And I love how you thought originally that it's not enough. You thought that, thinking about the baby, right, would actually...
I thought it would go the other way backwards. She thought about linking the baby to being on the airplane.
That the anxiety would take over.
Yeah.
Also the memory of the baby, but it turned out the safe memory kind of took over.
Yeah, I've had some clients say, I don't want to link the airplane to making love because it's going to screw up my love life, but it doesn't do that.
I guess it's more powerful.
I guess the love life is more powerful than the airplane. I guess that's what it comes down
to. Yeah. It's
which reminds me, Stephen Porges has had something interesting to say, talking about the vagus nerve when it's stimulated and causes calming. He says it's like being in a car with an automatic transmission. If you put your foot solidly on the brake, and he actually calls this stimulation of the vagal nerve, he calls it vagal braking because it slows the heart rate, for example. And he says when you put your foot solidly on the brake of the car, you can pump on the accelerator and put more gas in the engine. You're not going to have the car go anywhere. The vagal brake can override the stress hormones completely, he says.
No matter how much you push on the gas. Wow. Really interesting stuff, Tom. It's
because we spend so much time talking about reducing stress. We don't pay much attention to how we can answer stress by pushing back against the effect it has on us by activating the vagus, except maybe through breathing exercises, which is kind of weak compared with, because it's on and off, compared with something that's steady, like the face, voice, and touch of your friend.
Yeah. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, I think it also comes down to a lot of practice because
Yeah, you want
people are going
to work
yeah,
automatically.
yeah. And you're going to have to keep on linking. You're going to have to keep on thinking about that special time. That's not even special time, that safe feeling that you have with somebody where you felt not judged on a consistent basis when you feel anxious, either for a future event that comes up in your life, or even if it's happening now in your life. You're going to have to keep on, uh, I guess, disciplining yourself to do that.
Well, it's like first responders, when they get into a life or death situation, their brain gets fried. How do they perform? Because they've trained repeatedly to do a certain procedure so they could just go on autopilot. We want this
Yeah.
protection to work completely automatically.
Yeah. And once you guys link up that safe event to all your different types of anxieties, it will work automatically.
Yeah.
I can say that firsthand, by the way. And I think you have a lot of testimonials,
Yeah.
definitely. I've
Yeah.
seen in your groups and on your website. It works. Whether you believe in it or not, it
Well, the
works.
thing that people say is they get on the airplane and then they say, I should be really freaked out, and why am I not feeling anything? They get worried about that. Because the amygdala is just not doing anything to them, and they're not used to that. That is so strange.
It's crazy. And it's so funny because people would never think that you can change anxiety, because again, especially with a CBT therapist, right? Like people think that it's a whole different procedure and a whole different process, but it's kind of this backwards process of just, it can work automatically because the amygdala isn't part of the prefrontal cortex, right? It's not about thoughts. It's more linked to feeling in a way. And so
I would guess that if you have near an CBT therapist who is really non-judgmental, regardless of how they approach working with the client, as long as you're talking about the issues and you're not being judgmental, your presence is going to become the calming influence.
yeah,
Not
I've seen.
necessarily what you think you're doing. I know a woman here who does alternative medicine, and she gives them homeopathic remedies, and which we had some arguments about it. She says it's effective medically. I think it's effective because she puts them together for these people. I think she's the healing agent because she's just one of those people who's loving and non-judgmental.
I'll tell you a story, Tom. I had a client who was so scared. It was a woman, and in her early 20s, and she was petrified to tell me a story about her life. And for whatever reason, she thought that I was going to judge her tremendously. And when I heard the story, it's funny because a lot of clients, really, it's hard for them to really understand and to see what we see in our offices. And I'm sure with your experience, you've seen a lot in your day. And we've heard a lot, and I didn't really respond in a way that was, and it's funny because at the time I didn't really realize how important it was to respond in such a calming, non-judgmental way, and I did, and once I heard her to her it was the most embarrassing thing. It was hard for her to reveal it to herself, but once I heard the story that she was telling me, I responded in a way that was very okay. I hear it, so it's not. It didn't shatter my world, and she was so shocked that it didn't shatter my. She was more concerned with that it didn't shatter my world than actually telling me. And she kept asking me, how are you responding like this? Like you don't judge me differently?" She asked me straight out, like how do you not see me differently? And once I showed her how I understood it, it kind of reminds me of how a mother responds to the infant in a
Yeah.
way, right? And in a way that's in a way that's forming a secure attachment. And so when you have someone like that, I think it's just reflecting off you. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's powerful because once you find just one person who's like that, it's kind of like a big jar of peanut butter. You can spread it on as many crackers as you want.
I love that analogy. That's awesome.
You
That's
can
great.
put it on elevators, bridges, tunnels, airplanes, MRIs, anything.
Because you feel safe. You feel safe. You feel like you're taking care. Like nothing. It can't hurt you. Yeah. It's very important for us to feel safe, and you just need that one. I love how you said you just need that one person.
Well, I'm thinking about when I say that, and like once again, this person no longer alive. But when I was a kid, I grew up in North Carolina. My parents were very religious, and it was. And sometimes I'd ask them, how to do something, and they say, "Well, what would Jesus do?" I don't know. It's a hard act to follow. So felt very criticized and judged all the time, except for one person in the extended family. It was a guy who worked for my grandmother in the business that she ran. His name was Ennis Merritt. And when it rained, Ennis he normally did gardening. He was a florist that she ran. And so he didn't have any work to do. We'd sit on the front porch and we'd just watch it rain for hours. And in the South, these big thunderstorms and downbursts, the street in front of the house was filled with water. And as the raindrops went down, they would jump up, and he'd call them jumping jacks. So we'd just sit there and just hang out. Years later, now keep in mind, he's the only person in the family that didn't judge me. We just hung out. So years later, in the Air Force, I bought a race car, a Lola Formula 3. And in Europe, when it rains, they go ahead and race. And drivers are terrified of racing in the rain. So I would slide into the car and it would start raining. And I feel so relaxed. This is great. So it was calming to race in the rain. And I didn't know why until I thought about it years later about hanging out with Ennis in the rain. He's the calming influence. So when it rains, it was anchored to that experience with him.
Yeah, it's associated with it. It's linked together, and it's bonded in a way. It's bonded to that. Yeah. Wow, really, I'm so happy that so Tom, I this was really awesome, and I'm happy that we did this. This was great. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I don't know. It's just, to me, I think that all these years I've been doing this, I could not quite believe it worked because it just seems so simple until the Salk Institute research that shows exactly why. It's the code, man. Just recode it. That's
just recoding what it means with a safe event. And also, I'll also add. There was a point I wanted to add about the non-judgmental element, right? Again, that we were talking, especially with that story that you just said, with the rain, is that also when it comes to our own judgment on ourselves, yeah. Right? Us judging ourselves too strictly can even create an insecure attachment within ourselves. That's how we become insecure. Yeah. When we judge ourselves, when we're not, and again, accepting is a tough word, because when I say accepting, I don't mean to just accept who you are and not do anything about it, but to accept the experience, accept that that's what you're having, right? And to be there kind of for yourself. So even in a way, you could form a secure attachment for yourself. Like we're always tested like that. Whenever we do something with that, or whenever we get upset at ourselves, right? We could the way that we react, the way that we react to ourselves will determine whether we're securely or insecurely attached to ourselves in a way, if that makes sense.
I was just thinking about, what's that thing they say about depression is rage directed at one's own self, but it doesn't have to be rage necessarily. It could just be criticism directed.
It could be judgment, yeah, because we do have a relationship towards ourselves. Yeah. We are related to ourselves, and so that part of you better treat yourself kindly, or else you're not going to get that secure attachment. So that's also something to think about. Yeah. Wow. Tom, I really do appreciate you coming on, and this was fun. This was great, and I learned so much
about this stuff.
Yeah. We could, and again, if anyone's watching, these two books are phenomenal. If you have a specific fear of flying, get this. And if you want to learn about anxiety in general, you could get this. But if you do have general anxiety, I would recommend this as well. So I guess, Tom, this is more for fear of flying, and this is just for overall panic and anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Everything else that comes along with
life. It actually has scripts for elevators, bridges, tunnels, to actually go through a 10-day program of treating yourself to change your codes. Although
Yeah.
you're not going to see anything in those books about code exactly, but it's the same because I knew it was working and not quite. Don't think I had the explanation down cold. But the Salk Institute research now really makes it very clear. The amygdala is not smart enough to know what you're thinking. Doesn't know
Yeah.
what the content is. It just says the code attached to the content. That's what I read, and that's
And
how
say
I.
that again in case anyone wants to look that up. I'm curious. But the Salk
Salk,
Institute?
yeah, the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, has done this research where they have changed they have been able to turn parts of the brain on and off at will, and they found that the amygdala has these sensors all over the place. You shine a light on one of them, and it makes the rat want to hunt. Shine the light on another one, it makes it want to run away. Shine the light on another one, it wants to mate. Shine the light on another one, and it wants to go to sleep. So it kind of reminds me of, you go to an apartment building in New York City, walk in the door, and you see this panel of names and buttons, and which person you're going to punch, which button you're going to push. So the code, depending on what the code is, it's going to go to the corresponding sensor and cause that response.
It's that simple. So I guess if I could summarize it, just change your codes. Change your
Got
codes.
it. Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
you do
and
that by
that's it.
finding a person who you're okay with. The whole question of whether you're okay or not doesn't even exist. Hard to find that person, maybe, but dig around, you'll find somebody
Yeah.
who,
It's not even about that. It's how you feel.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. Well, Tom,
All
I
right. Thanks,
appreciate
Henry.
it. And thank you. Yeah. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.